Welcome back for Season 2 of the official Indy Pro 2000 Championship. Where now we'll set off on 12 weeks of official iRacing to try and crown another Indy Pro 2000 champion. My name is Jonathan Burke. Alongside me today is Will Vincent, Hugo Luis doing the production work, and we are here in northern New York at the Watkins Glen International Raceway. We're riding on the boot setup, 23 drivers ready to take to the field. A little bit of a warm one in upstate New York, 33 degrees Celsius the track temp, 30 degrees the ambient temp, and 16 kilometer per hour wind. Going to be a bit of a challenge, especially down that long back straightaway and where the draft is oh so important.
Yeah, indeed. Hello, everyone. And that back straightaway is going to be incredibly fun to watch. Of course, the drafting opportunities, low curbs, don't forget, at the inner loop. And that means that the drivers can be really aggressive there. And let's not forget as well, Jonathan, this is a track that has a lot of IndyCar and open wheel racing pedigree. These days, yes, you see more NASCAR racing, more GT racing here. But open wheel racing has been in this track's lifeblood since day number one. Of course, the NTT Data IndyCar Series has run here. The Road to Indy has run here. And for many drivers, they've always said this has been one of the most favorite stops on the calendar.
This is personally one of my favorite stops. I've gotten to broadcast several races here, and it's going to be really fun to see these Pro Mazdas go around. But speaking of the schedule, let's look at the rest of it. Again, we start in northern New York at Watkins Glen. When we head to Italy at Monza, then we head back to the United States for an oval at Iowa, and then the Nordschleife. That's going to be a fun one, 5 laps around that. And then we stay in Germany for the Hockenheim Ring, a new course, going to be an interesting challenge for these drivers. And then weeks 6 through 10, we stay in the States, Phoenix, Long Beach, Daytona Road, Laguna Seca, USA Speedway, before heading to Spa and then finishing out the season at Barber. A really interesting and unique schedule.
Indeed, and I like the fact they're getting some air miles in towards the end of the season, going straight from America to Belgium, then back to the US. Nordschleife is going to be interesting, of course, the longest track that is on iRacing, and the curbs make it rather complicated for open wheel, kind of like lower powered cars such as this. Good to have a variety of ovals as well. Iowa, of course, where that banking works, going to be fun. Phoenix is always one of those ovals that you either get or you don't. USA Speedway is going to be one of the wild card rounds of the season. And for those of you who are maybe new to iRacing, the way that the championship works, basically you'll be counted your best 8 weeks out of 12. And what that does, of course, mean is that you don't really have to be all that good on the ovals. You can focus on the road course races. But if you are one of those people that is more of an oval specialist, I've seen a couple of names already in this split, people like Stefan Remedy as an example, they are going to be banking, Jonathan, on those oval races to try and move themselves up the order.
Yeah, and sometimes those oval races can actually be a help to some drivers that maybe are good on the road course. Andrew LaBerry, you can see he's a little bit further down the order than he'd like to be right now, in 18th in qualifying. Was one of the strongest, actually, on the ovals last season, so it can be proved helpful. And as we're riding along here with Frank Newen, another driver who was decent on the ovals as well as the road courses.
Yeah, Nugent just working himself towards the end of a lap. Number 10 car in 10th place, 7 tenths of a second back he was as it comes towards the start-finish line. A lot of movement, actually, in this kind of second lap of qualifying. Nugent was P number 12, remains P12, loses quite a bit of time there as well. The qualifying laps, I'm not going to lie to you here, actually, Jonathan, very close out front and little clusters of cars. This is what we often see at Watkins Glen. Clusters of cars very close together in terms of their qualifying laps.
Yeah, and this is kind of a weird mix of a field we have here. Many of you who've been watching last season may see some familiar names. Austriakaya, the female Russian driver, the number 16, racing a lot last season. You can see Micheline Green up the order. But Christopher Herbigno, who's in number 1 driver in 3rd, didn't see him a lot last season, and many of those drivers actually in the top 4 didn't see a lot during the season. So it's a weird, interesting kind of split we have here of some of the regulars we saw last season and some newer drivers trying to make their way in the series.
And that's always one of the fun things about iRacing. You know, these 12-week schedules, a lot of people will look at the schedule, have a look at, of course, what their schedulers themselves, and they'll often choose 1 or 2 series to run over the course of those 12 weeks. And week number 1 is your chance to dip your toes into something new. And let's not forget, there might be a couple of drivers whose license, they've just been able to start running this car. And of course, with your license increasing, that gives you new opportunities as well. I must say, by the way, that number 16 car, I think might be the longest surname that I ever seen on iRacing to date in my, well, over a decade of commentating on this thing right now.
It's a long one. It's a bit of a challenging one. I think I've been trying to pronounce it as best I can. I know she is a favorite among some of the fans in the YouTube chat, and she's one of my favorites as well. Been especially towards the end of the season, Lumbum was a very aggressive driver and making all sorts of fun moves. And another thing as well is we get so many drivers from walks of life. I don't know if you saw the Imola race we had. We had a Fittipaldi and then a Mercedes junior driver and then a European karting champion in that split, along with top-level iRacers. It was a really fun race. So you get drivers from all over the place.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about the kind of off-season for motor racing drivers as well. They will try to keep themselves fresh on, things like iRacing. You're going to see a little bit less of that this season, of course, because real-world motorsports is picking up more and more as we're now into March. F1 season coming, of course. We've got IMSA that's doing the 12 hours of Sebring, this weekend. Qualifying is over, though, so we've got ourselves a grid ready to go.
The session is advancing, and here is our starting grid for the first race of the second season. Mikko Nurmi from Finland lines up P1. Will Redford from the British Isles lining up in P2. Christopher Herbigno in P3. Nicolo Haim, we saw him a little bit towards the end of the last season, put on a show. He's a very aggressive driver in P4. Micheline Green finished 3rd in the championship last season in P5. Udus Biligas, the number 15 in P6. And Medina lining up in P7, Edward Paddock in P8. Fabio Berchtold, very talented and good midfield driver in this series in P9. Henry Salim in P10. Connor Harrington right outside the top 10 in P11. And Stefan Remedy, the number 12 in P12. Frank Nguyen in P13. Thomas Egger in P14. They're going to have some work to do to get towards the front. And Schlegel in P15. Servi Seppa is used to starting in the back and working his way to the front. The Finnish drivers in P16. Pierre Boudon in P17 and Andrew L. Berry in P18. Our last row, Lubov Ostriokaya in P19, Gary Bystorm in P20, Edward Deering from Illinois in P21, and Stephanie Krurox in P22. So a big field, lots of action, lots of places for overtaking. This should be a really fun, interesting race.
Oh yeah, definitely. Have a look through the iRating as well. Of course, this is the top of 2 splits that we have, and just having a look, and the highest iRating 5,984, lowest iRating just in the low 2,000 ranges. And those of you that might want to know a little bit more about what iRating is and how it works, basically you start at 1,350 iRating. As you go up and down, you advance your career. Basically, your iRacing will go up the more consistently you finish at the top end of the field. And as I say, at the front of your field, you've got Herbino with 5,984 iRating. That is almost getting close to the level that you'd expect to see some of those drivers looking to go in the Road to Pro Series or even maybe the World Championship, Jonathan.
And again, we've seen it as high as 7,000 iRating. Greg Sainz was, carrying the number 1 a lot last season, and I didn't admire it. Like, I was looking at the iRating in this field. It's a very high and talented split. A lot of A and B licensed drivers as well. This is a very high and experienced field. So even if you may not be fighting for the lead, we're going to see intense action throughout the race. And these drivers, we saw a lot of it last season. They fight for every position they can get.
Indeed. We want to pay attention quite a lot to this part of the racetrack. Note the curb on the inside of the last part of the S's. That is a more deep curve than what you'll see coming up into the inner loop. Now you can literally get one of these cars, all 4 wheels, on the actual curb. It's that wide, And you can get away with doing it as well. You won't be given a slowdown penalty if you really do attack those low curbs down at the inner loop. Of course, the one thing you don't want to do is outbrake yourself and then have to take yourself the slowdown penalty. The corner that I am most worried about, I've got two at this racetrack that we were talking off there, is the one after the outer loop that we're going to call turn number 7. Other track maps might vary, but it's because you've just gone from the traditional old school layout onto that boot section, and all the corners at this racetrack, Jonathan, they are kind of cambered in some way, but turn 7, the camber is just so weird. If you go into the throttle just minutely early, you're going to be in a guardrail.
The other problem is, like, look at the guardrails. It's not a wide area. A mistake here could cause a big pileup. I ran an IMSA split towards the end of the season, last season, that was here at the boot layout, and I went into the corner. It's a blind corner. There was a big pileup in that section. I had no idea. Rammed my poor BMW into it. So not only can it be a site just for difficulty driving, but also for trouble.
I've seen over the years 20-car pileups down at turns, well, 1, 2, and 3. Turn 1 is so easy. You'll see a lot of the drivers will try and be really aggressive over the curb at turn 1. Get it wrong, that car's going to spear right to the right into the guardrail, right back out onto track. This corner right now, turn number 9, is one that you will see some passing, but turn 10 is many drivers' bogey corners. You're going back onto the old layout, and this is actually the one time where you go through the apex of the corner and it's actually flat. So you've got to pay attention there again, getting onto the gas for the center of turn number 10.
Yeah, get on it too early, you're going to spin yourself out too late, you're going to make yourself a victim coming down to these final 2 corners. This is the final 2 corners that would be on the NASCAR track. I believe turns 6 and 7, but here they're going to be turns 11 and 12. The Porsche pace car is going to pull down to the inside, and so does one of the leaders. That's an interesting one right there. His green flag is out. I believe that was Mikko Nurmi that pulled all the way to the inside. Redford and Herbigno are going to fight for the lead. 3-1 around the outside, going the 4 machine of Haim. Bold move. There were 3 wide. There's a big crash in the background. Herbigno and Haim are going side by side through the S's. The 3 of Redford really nowhere to go at the moment. Michelin Green is now in the 4th position. And it looks like this is going to be a very intense run down into the bus stop for the first time. The draft always super strong here, no matter what car you're driving. Here comes Redford to the inside of Haim. And Christopher Herbigno will get the lead and hold it for now.
It's Pierre Bourdon, number 21 machine, who is involved in that incident down at turn number 1. Pierre Bourdon, of course, one of those drivers who has been a part of the open wheel community on iRacing for almost a decade now, if not more. So he's very experienced in terms of running open wheel cars on iRacing, just not had the luck here today. Mikko Nurmi, this is going to be an interesting one because of the way that he came on towards pit road. I am worried one or 2 drivers might get an inadvertent black flag by iRacing just to the way the automated system works, but it is still really close between Herbigno and Redford out front.
Yeah, the concern, I think, is going to be for Herbigno and Haim. They were on the row right behind Nurmi, who started P2. I'm wondering if he made a miscalculation, maybe with filling the fuel setup or something like that. But this is what happened to Pierre Bourdon. They're going to go 3 wide. He's going to look inside of the Servi Seppa and then just gets into the 16 of Lumba Mastiakaya. That is why she is also off the pace in 21st position. But now back to the live pictures, and Herbigno is going to lead lap 1. But Will Redford is looking for a dive down to turn 1. In fact, he's already alongside the Belgian driver and down to the inside. No, decides to back out and think better of it. Turn 1's a good passing opportunity, but if you get it wrong, both those drivers could have ended up in the guardrails.
And interestingly enough, actually having the outside line into turn 1 can be an advantage. Remember what I said on the pace lap about the fact that you like to push out wide onto that extra bit of asphalt and over that curb at turn number 1. If you're the outside driver, you can dictate how much room you give to the inside line, and that can make all the difference. Being punched down on the inside of turn 1 is never going to be fun, and I think that Redford realised that he wasn't going to be able to take his normal line, just backed out of it, not wanting to make too aggressive a move too early.
No, and if you know you're kind of faster on pace, you could be a little bit patient. Again, we have 18 laps here today. We're just on lap 2. And right now, it's just these two out front. Nicola Haim got closer when they went into the bus stop, but unable really to put pressure on these two out front.
Yeah, as just keeping an update, number 16 car, Lubov, is out on pit road as well. So the incident that she was involved in, along with Pierre Bondon, lap number 1, that has put our Russian driver onto pit road, and she is likely going to be done for the day. There you can see in the picture-in-picture, and Mika Numri is back out on track in the number 2 car. However, is now 48 seconds behind the race leader. Basically, at this stage, the number 2 car is just hoping for some retirement and trying to minimize his iRacing loss.
And then right now, it might not be too long. There might be a little bit more action. Again, we're just 2 laps completed out of the 18, so still plenty of action to come. A little bit into the dirt for Herbigno, trying to get as much as that track as possible to work for him. They're not dropping Nicola Haim, Micheline Green, or Pelukius in the 15. They're still kind of lurking in the distance, and I think that's going to be the fear for Herbigno and Redford. If those two start fighting, all of a sudden it's a 5-horse race out front.
As we see the move, this could be interesting. Redford on the outside. Look at that. That was almost Ryan Hunter-Reay with that number 4 car. You're right. And the thing about this racetrack is, Jonathan, because you are on full throttle for about 70% of the lap here, it means that it is one where momentum and drafting is so important. You start going side by side, even for a couple of corners, you're going to lose so much momentum. The guys behind you are going to be ready to pounce. And that number 4 car, though, of Haim is basically just sat there stalking, almost sort of about making it free wide into the inner loop that last time.
We saw Haim at Sebring. He was a very, very aggressive driver. Is not one to fear making a pass. Right now, Redford looking to the inside, backs out of it, and Haim looks to the inside as well, but backs out of it. It might be Herbigno holding up Redford a little bit. That 3 car feels like he has a bit more pace. You can see this train all the way back to Andrew L. Berry, who's a little bit off the pace in 13th. There's 12 cars, all within just a couple seconds of each other. Really, really good and competitive race right now.
Yeah, and this is a look on the exit of turn 10. That short little run that you then have before the last 2 corners on this essentially 12-corner racetrack. It will vary depending on how you want to name the inner loop corners. As we're back on board with the number 4 car, you're right that we've currently got ourselves 12 drivers within 5 seconds of your race leader. 3 laps of this race complete. That is impressive. In fact, you've got 16 drivers within 10 seconds of your race leader right now. One thing I will say that we haven't really touched upon, and we might have to pause that thought for a moment as they all think about drafty business again. We were thinking there might have been a bigger incident at the start, but we've only had 2 retirees so far.
Yeah, the new smoke model making me double check myself. I thought there was a 3 or 4 car pileup going into turn 1, but it really was just a lot of smoke coming out of that 21 machine that was off spinning in the distance. But here comes Redford. I think he's getting a bit more impatient because he sees the cars behind him. He knows he might be faster. He's going to go along the outside into the toe. Might get a better drive off and make an inside move coming into the boot heel. Here they come up the hill, and it's going to be downhill braking, a very difficult point of the track to get right. They were almost alongside. Redford pulls back behind Herbigno. He's being very, very patient, but I think he realizes that his 3 machine might just be a bit faster than that 1 machine, and they have to move quickly because look at the pack behind him.
Yeah, Redford did actually do something very useful down at the toe corner. If you take the outside line, basically you can get onto the throttle a little bit earlier and then use that extra speed advantage down into the heel. So you've got your battle for first on the left-hand side of the screen, battle for 10th on the right-hand side. And again, all the way down, I'm wondering actually whether he's biding his time, Redford, because he's had about 3 or 4 opportunities now to make that move. Of course, if you are going to be the person leading at the front of the field, you have the opportunity to pull away, but at the same time, you then become the sitting duck later on in the race. And this is going to be another way of looking at this. And again, Redford just doesn't seem as though he wants to go for the race lead. He just wants to almost distract Herbigno a little bit more. And in fact, Redford's going to lose a position now as a consequence.
And not only that, Harbinio loses a position. A brilliant move from the Rust Racing driver of Haim, the number 4 machine, now in P1, and now his teammate, Mitchell Ian Green, is on the gearbox of the number 3 machine. That was excellent drafting move and really just good understanding and timing of where to put his car. And now this 4 car, he's going to want to scamper off, and I think Redford may be a bit more impatient now with Harbinio.
I think also we've just learned what the power of the draft is down this racetrack, and that's what I was saying about Redford, knowing that you might be the sitting duck, because he basically was able to get alongside and past 2 cars down one straightaway, and it's always deceptive on the exit of the S's towards the inner loop. You think it's a long straightaway. It's not. You need to almost be right on the rear wing as you exit the S's. And I will say, Haim did that absolutely perfectly, but we do now know the draft is such you can get past 2 cars in a short distance of time.
Yeah, and you can even see by the way that 4 car moves is almost a evasive action being needed to be taken by Redford as Harbinio went to the inside to try and get as much draft off the 4 Rust Racing machine as possible. I think Redford has now also made the realization this number 1 car is kind of holding him up because Haim is able to pull out almost a half a second gap to the lead, and now here comes Mitchell Ian Green, the number 13 Pennsylvanian, another Rust Racing driver as well. Is he going to get a 2-for-1 special going down into the bus stop? Redford's now pinned up behind the 1 machine, going to be side by side, late on the braking is going to be the 13. They almost touch heading into the bus stop, a little bit on the curbing. And Redford's going to be the one to pay the price. He has to back out. Mitchell Green almost sideways. That could have been close for all 3 of those drivers.
And Green really had to get out of that there because he was all forms of wrong heading into the inner loop. And if he hadn't have backed out of it, he would have basically either spun or got himself a slowdown penalty. One thing that Green was relying on there was the supplementary toe from Haim, who was just allowing him, when they both went to the left-hand side of the racetrack, to get more of that kind of draft there. But Harbinio and Redford were doing a good job just holding that inside line into the inner loop. And that's going to be a case of things to come now. If these guys will be looking at your top 4, they're waiting for the last 2 or 3 laps. It's a guy's P5 from basically Ann Medina down to, I'd say right now, Stefan Remedy in P10. That's going to be the fun thing to notice. Is anyone going to start moving slowly up the field from there in the next 4 or 5 laps?
Yeah, I was going to say, you definitely can't count out that 8 machine of Medina. Everett Paddock has been towards the front. Stefan Remedy, Birchall, and Newen have been frequent runners in this series. You really can't count them out, but also some of the newer names, Harrington and Salim. Really, the draft is just so powerful, you can't count anyone out, as again, through the S's, Redford is, I don't know if he's trying to be super, super patient or if he's trying to just desperately get around Harbinio. But I think he's also, again, made the realization that 4 car is fast and is almost pulled out to the point where the draft is not going to be effective against Haim.
Timing. It's all about timing. And of course, I covered our Sunday night prime time in the past of 2K World Cup when it was all down to timing. It was all about execution. It's very similar in these Pro 2000 cars. It's all about execution. This is why this is such a good car to use on that kind of road to Indy. It's a reason why they kind of modernized the car back in 2018. They've done all this stuff to it to make it a versatile road and oval car, but make it one where, you know, you've got to be able to work for positions. It's not given to you on a silver platter. I say that as we look at the chrome car there of Green, when it pretty much is a silver platter. I'm going to stop talking now.
Had that silver number 13. We saw him a lot last season. He almost made it a 1-2 finish for Rust Racing, and he has the possibility to do it here with Haim in the lead and this 13 machine lurking in the background. Another 1-2 is possible. But again, just Redford, he's content to ride behind Harbinio, but they're running out of time as now a second has been opened up, and that 4 machine has gotten away. That 3 car needs to make a move now, and so is that 13. Anyone who wants to win this race, I think the clock is ticking. You realize that 4 machine's fast, and here comes Redford down to the inside. Does he make the move? No. Unable to get it done. Harbinio's later on the brakes. I also think maybe that 1 car is running a bit more downforce than the 3, because you can see he's stronger in some of these corners, but then as soon as we hit these straights, all of a sudden Redford's on him like wet on rice.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. it'd be great to get an onboard actually of Redford down one of these straightaways just to see. And actually, you've got Green now alongside Redford, and it's all going to be changed again. Green going to second place. If he can just hold that inside second time in a row, he's been all aggressive over that curve to go on board with Anna Medema. But I think you're right in terms of the downforce levels. And one thing that's worth noting, Haim, after those three drivers had to scrap, 2.2 seconds, now completely clear of a draft. And this is when we're going to see how the raw pace is between Haim, Herbino, Green, Redford, etc. One thing they could do is start working together, P2 through 4, and actually allow each other to pass and try and use that extra toe, that slipstream. We see it a lot at oval racing in the iRacing IndyCar series.
Oh,
no. That's a lot of smoke.
Herbino got it all wrong, heading into the heel. He's off into the grass, and down the order goes the #1 Delta Sport U4K driver, now all the way down to 9th position. And now Mitchell, Me, and Green, the Rust Racing machine, is in second. It's a Rust Racing 1-2, and now Herbino's going to have a lot of work to do.
This changes everything, because now Green can play the role of Eddie Irvine to the Michael Schumacher. Here's the replay. I've seen it so many times. Our director, Hugo Louise, will remember those little moments you go offline when he used to be a World Championship open wheel driver. I've seen it happen in the Porsche Takeaway Esports Super Cup. The heel corner is so deceptive. You can overtake there, but it's one of those corners that, because again, there's not that much camber there. All the corners have a degree of camber, but the heel has the least of almost any of them on the racetrack. It's one of those things that if you do outbrake yourself, you are just going to run into the kitty litter. And Herbino, he just snapped a brake. I think he misjudged his braking zone by about 10 meters, tried to, go a little bit deeper onto the brakes and just snatched it as a consequence.
And now he's going to have work to do, and maybe the tires to cool off as well. Remember, we mentioned 33 degrees Celsius, this track temp. He could have cooked the tires. Here's the onboard, just back end comes out a little bit, and then drifting onto the grass. Well, at least he's making a good audition for World Rallycross.
Yeah.
If Delta Sport U4K wants to run a Rallycross team. But back now to live pictures. Haim is now 3 seconds away, and it looks like Mitchell Lee and Green is not going to be under fire from Redford. Down the inside comes the 3 machine. They're going to be side by side in this corner. They touch. The 13 is now off into the gravel. Mitchell Lee and Green slow, has to avoid the barrier. He's not able to get any control of that car, and he tows, and that might be the end of the day for the number 13 machine. And now the 3 cars the head of this train, and Medema is now on the podium. And that's a lot of drama in that one corner in the last 2 laps.
I'm sorry, I absolutely hate it when drivers do that. Yeah, that was nothing more than a rage quit. And yes, you might be car number 13 out of 23. And yes, you might, lose slightly less IR rating. But the way we saw that contact, I mean, we're getting the replay up right now. It's going to be wheel-to-wheel contact. I need to see it from the other angle, but I still see all 4 of those wheels kind of pointing in the right direction. And I don't understand why that was just a tow back to pit road. I always say that's annoying and lazy. That's not the kind of racing that you would do on the circuit. That's not the type of racing I like to see on iRacing.
It may have been also like he just wasn't able to get away from the tire barriers. There goes Medema. We haven't talked about him much so far.
They've got a reverse gear in this car. I'm very sorry. He could have gotten back onto the track if he wanted to.
Yeah, so now Mitchell Lee and Green is getting towed back to pit lane and is slowly trying to get his way back on the racetrack. He's down all the way in 21st. Nurmi, who also had a start issue. We still don't know what happened to the 2 machine in 20th. As here comes the 3. Oh, that's the replay, actually.
I take that back. I take that back there. Thank you very much to our director. I did see the right rear tyre. It looked as though that was a suspension image there. Suspension issue. So the left rear tyre actually was the one that got hit. So I'll take back completely what I said. This is why replays are often so useful. So I do apologise there to Mitchell Lee and Green, but you can now see it was basically that rear tyre. We just saw it briefly there, Jonathan, just catching the suspension. That would completely unbalance a race car and make it undrivable.
Wish we could the magic marker that we were showing. Maybe our producer would have been able to circle it for me, because I didn't see it as well. So that's a good catch by you, Will, and a good catch by our producer, Hugo Luis. But now here comes the battle for second again. Redford's trying to get to the inside of the 8 machine, but now Ann Medema, who's just been quietly in 5th almost this entire time, sitting pretty in that TNT racing machine on the podium. Nikolai Hayim showing signs of Greg Seitz, his teammate last season, getting away out front to a nice lead as here comes the 15 in the middle of this battle pack, and they're going to get feisty as the race goes on, trying to get as many positions as they can. There's still 8 cars in this field trying to get onto the podium.
They are, but we're looking more and more as if they're only going to be fighting for the silver and bronze medal positions, because now Nikolai Hayim has just pulled out a 4.0 second gap as it stands right now. Talk about TNT racing again. I love to still see teams. TNT racing have been running on iRacing, I think, for about a decade now. Ever since I joined iRacing back in late 2010, early 2011, they've been there. They've had some ups, they've had some downs. They've had a number of great drivers there over the years, and it's great to see Medina right there in second place. Although look at Redford, weaving one way, weaving another. I don't think you're allowed to weave that many times in a straight.
Well, you can say he's looking for a way around. He's not really blocking Everett Paddock yet, but that number 6 machine may be getting closer and closer if you continue weaving around on that straightaway. And Medema, where would you want to be in this situation? Would you want to be that 8 car leading up front in this battle pack, knowing that everyone's going to be looking for a way around you, or would they rather be the 3 car, kind of in the best position where you have the toe to make sure the guy behind you doesn't get around you?
If I was Medema, I would be kind of happy in second place because of what you said earlier about that number 3 car of Redford potentially having a bit more downforce on that car. We've not been able to see him actually make and complete passes. Now, he could be playing a game of possum, and he could be just kind of lulling people into a false sense of security. But if I was Medema right now, I'd be happy with P2, 3, and 4 the way they are, because this will give actually her a little bit more of a defense, although don't forget we now got Everett Paddock going down, and he's up to 3rd place.
Yeah, I was going to say that maybe that 3 car just has way too much downforce down the inside of the outer loop. That's a bold move from the British driver of Will Redford. Paddock is now going to stay side by side. They're going to head into this tricky section. You mentioned it earlier. Passing here and side by side here is not recommended. They stay clean. The 3 and the 6 continue to be side by side. And Medema is probably just laughing as he's watching this in his rearview mirror. These two fight. The 6 very, very deep in the corner. Here comes Salim in the 7. They're going to go up the hill and then down the hill into turn 9, the heel of the boot on the Kinetic Racing driver, the number 15 of Pulikas. Looking at this battle, one of these drivers makes a mistake in front. He can take advantage, although to the inside, that's Herbanyo on the recovery drive for the Delta Sport U4K team. Side by side, great action. And the number 1 all of a sudden is going to be back in this fight for the podium positions.
Oh, this is going to be a great last 6 laps of this race. I think all the conversations we had about Redford, is he running a bit more downforce? I think they've been confirmed. Going from the inside to the outside down at turn number 7, being able to hold the outside down at turn 7, to then have the inside line into the toe. You've got to be a brave man to be able to drive, or women of course, to drive around the outside of turn 7. And he did that absolutely perfectly. So now what we've got to see, in my opinion, is Herbanyo. How aggressive is he going to be and how quickly is he going to be? He basically needs to take one driver a lap to be back in contention come the end of this race, but he's got quite a bit of a way to go. Salmon's now up into 3rd place, or he was Henry Salmon for a moment.
Yeah, Salmon, good use of the straightaway speed. And yeah, that's basically confirmed that 3 car is running a lot of downforce and back down to the inside of the outer loop again. He tried it last lap and it did not work, but this time the 3 car is able to get it clear. The 7 peeks out again as we now head into the boot section again. And Medema's loving this. Everyone's fighting behind him, and he's just enjoying a big crash behind. That's Paddock into the outside wall. That's the Kinetic Racing number 15, I think, involved as well. And a huge, huge collision that's going to decide, I think, the rest of the top 5 here. Herbanyo is now in 5th. Medema is going to have to play defense as Redford looks to the outside. And they calm down for the time being. And boy, that was a heavy impact. I saw that 6 car Paddock airborne. And you mentioned that section being one of the trickiest ones on the circuit, Will.
Yeah, and I said we're going to have a crash there before the race is over. Well, that one's been ticked off the list. And one issue for Herbanyo is now he's 1.2 back from Henry Salmon, and that means that he's just kind of outside of draft range. All of a sudden, and here's the replay of Everett Paddock. This is down into 7, gets tagged from the rear, and then, yeah, just ends up completely into the tyre barrier. As we go back to live pictures, Herbino basically needs P2, 3, and 4 to start fighting, and Ann Medina made a bit of a mistake there, just pushing a little bit too wide through 1. This could now give Redford a bit of a move up as they get towards the inner loop.
Yeah, now here comes Salim. We've seen 2-for-1 specials going into the inner loop with that 3-car sitting duck, and maybe we're going to get another 2-for-1 special here. He gets clear of the 3, unable to break him late, though, into the outer loop, and this may be what the Delta Sport U4K driver Herbingo needs, is the 7-car to make a shake and slowly come back to him so that he can get a run. I also want to mention, I love seeing like some of these teams like Kinetic Racing, Delta Sport U4K in here, mixing it up with Rust Racing and TNT that are usual suspects in this series. It's just great to see so many talented drivers racing today. Yeah,
the gap between P4 P5 now back down below 1 second. And Medina is able to hold on there. For the number 7 car of Henry Salmon, I think that was more of a confidence issue than anything else. That car should have been able to go the tight way through the inner loop, and if you can't do that, that has just basically told Will Redford, that's fine, stick to the right hand side of the racetrack every time you go up on the exit of the S's, and you should have that 3rd place secured.
Well, what if he's worried about that 3-car? We already saw Redford and Micheline Green collide a little bit. We already saw this 3-car go side by side through the inner loop as well into the outer loop, and that 7-car just may not be strong enough. And now he's backing up further to Herbingo. Herbingo is going to have a huge draft, and they're taking as well Connor Harrington in the 9, who we have barely mentioned so far. Along with him, Harrington may be able to get into the top 5 as we have 3 laps to go here. Redford and Medina continue to squabble for P2. And now without Salmon right behind, Redford's going to have a clean shot to get by Medina, but again, running that higher downforce, he's just not able to make the move. He pulls out right here, just doesn't have enough momentum.
Into the inner loop. A bit of a twitch there again.
A bit.
By Medina. Yeah, lots of twitching going on. Of course, these tyres, we talk about the track temperature. It is warm out there. There is some rubber down the track, especially offline right now. That will make overtaking a bit more difficult. But actually, as these tyres have gone through a heat cycle, it's starting to get harder and harder for these drivers. And the thing for Redford, in particular, he's never had clean air in this race. So for Redford, I'm wondering, actually, is he going to have the grip to make a lunge if that's the only way he can do so?
Also, just think about tire wear. Like, he's been lunging back and forth almost every lap, trying to go inside, outside, going to the inside of the outer loop. Like, that car has got to be abusing his tire wear. He locks up a little bit, almost collides into the back of Medina, and now here comes Salim, Herbingo, and Harrington back into the conversation. And that was a crucial mistake. We saw on the right-hand side of the screen in the double box the usual suspects of Remedy, Birchall, Newen, and Barry fighting on the inside of the top 10. But this is going to be the big battle right here for the final podium positions. Redford to the inside, unable to get Medina. He's weaving back and forth. He's trying to find a way around the TNT Racing driver, but there's just nowhere for him to go. That downforce is just too strong for him. He needs to get him in a corner where he knows Medina is weak.
Yeah, and by the way, now we are just under 3 laps to go, so well done for assuming the role of Marty Reed there, just for the moment. But Medina is pushing, but sticking to her line. The weave again from Redford to the inside, to the outside, to the left, to the right, over the curbs. Redford's more aggressive over the curbs because of that downforce, in my opinion, over Medina. It seems to be her car. She prefers to keep it off the curbs, and that is something that you can adjust in this car, and it seems to be that Medina just doesn't want to be too aggressive through that inner loop section.
Oh, intense on the braking right there from Redford. He tried to think about going to the inside of Medina, nothing doing there. And they're going to head to the heel of the boot now. Redford is looking. By the way, while we've been talking about this battle, Hayimi's opened up a 7-second lead. Incredible drive from the Rust Racing driver.
Yeah, And Haim, as I say, as soon as these people were battling for second, third, fourth, fifth on track, it was always going to allow Nikolai Haim to start pulling out that gap more and more. The last time I looked at it, it was 4 seconds. Now it's up to 7 seconds. A little bit of lap traffic coming into play as well for Haim. Just worth noting, by the way, the number 16 car is back out on track. We've had 4 retirees from this race. Udlis Putklis, we saw actually inside the top 10 earlier, out of the race. Everett Paddock, Pierre Bourdon, and Mitchell Ian Green, of course. We saw that incident down at turn number 9, a handful of laps ago, but a lap and 3/4 to go. And all of a sudden, Redford's now the one completely under attack. And Salmon, look at this, we're going to go 3 wide.
And Herbigno is going to get aggressive. He's already alongside that number 3 machine. I think that 3 car has overcooked his tires, and there he goes. Outside of the podium positions goes Redford, and Herbigno is just 1 position away from getting back onto the podium. Medema now has a half-second gap, and Salmon in the 7. This is a really good performance from him. He's able to keep his nose out of trouble. I think that's just kind of been the thing for him. He's not confident with overtaking, as you've mentioned, but just staying out of trouble, putting his car in the right position. Again, he could be on track for a podium here, depending on where this 1 car finishes.
The interesting thing there for Medema is actually you want to have the car right behind you rather than being half a second back coming onto the last lap. Because of the way the drafting works, you do not want to have someone drafting from half a second back up the S's. It will make your life a lot more difficult into the inner loop on the final lap. And that pack of 1, 2, 3, 4 drivers has now closed back up together. Notice there is a 5th there at the rear of the shot, which is Harrington. Connor Harrington just sat there just in case it all goes wrong on this final lap for these 4.
The number 9 machine, it doesn't say number 9, I mean he's driving in the number 44, but the white flag is out. Nicolone Haim is already past turn 1 and is working his way through the S's, but this is the big battle right here for the final podium positions. Medema currently sits in 2nd. Salmon trying to hold on from an aggressive Delta Sport U4K machine on his way to try and make a comeback after a mistake in the heel of the boot. They ride through the S's. Medema half a second ahead. You mentioned it already. That draft is powerful. Here comes the 7. Closing, closing, and closing. But where can the 1 car go? Nothing doing then. Salim unable to get it done under braking. Medema is safe for now. Herbigno getting closer and closer to the gearbox. And here comes Redford to the outside of Herbigno.
Yeah, Salim there basically, I think might have just lifted out the gas a tiny bit on the exit of the inner loop. You're perfectly legal to do that. Just ruined all the momentum for Herbigno. Look at that pass though. Look at that attempt at a pass by Will Redford. Now he's got to take the outside line though into tow. This is where things could get a bit messy.
That 7 car was super loose heading into that boot section. A little bit of a touch there from Redford and Herbigno. Herbigno able to clear Redford, but Redford looking back to the inside. And now, as we mentioned, Harrington is now looking at maybe a podium. Salim still in 3rd position, and Medema looks to be safe for a TNT P2 as they head back on to the original circuit in turn 10. We just have turn 11 and 12 to go. Medema in 2nd, and across the line for the Rust Racing driver number 4, Nikolai Haim. It was an aggressive move to get him into P1. And the number 4 machine, Rust Racing, going back to victory lane. And here they come out of the corner, squabbling. Henry Salim is going to hang on for a podium. Herbigno beats out Redford at the line. And Harrington just at the end of that pack rounds out those 6 drivers. And here comes, I mentioned the usual suspects. Here comes Remedy, Berchhold, and Nguyen. Barry not too far behind to round out the top 10. And boy, was that an intense last lap, especially to decide those last few podium positions.
That, in terms of Salim, all happened down on the exit of the inner loop. That's how he got that podium position. And again, I'm not sure whether it was intentional or not, but by breaking the momentum of Herbigno, just in that kind of like that second part of the inner loop, you notice that Herbigno had to get off the gas pedal because he was about to run into the rear of Henry Salim. And because of that, Herbigno then lost momentum on the outer loop, the run down into turn 7. And ironically, by being a couple of miles an hour slower for the apex, the second part of the inner loop, that's what gave Henry Salim basically the podium, that bronze medal position in this, the first round of the championship.
Just a couple cars waiting across the line, and there's the 2 machine. As we look back at the replay, heading into this final lap, watch how sideways that 7 gets, just twitching all over the place. How Christophe Herbigno didn't run into the back of the gearbox is beyond me. This is excellent driving from both drivers, and then Redford, he's trying his best around the outside, but he just is not going to have the momentum.
And that was the second time that Salim basically was having a moment. First one at the inner loop, the second one there. Redford, I think the more of today is, on a track like this, having a little bit more comfortability in terms of downforce. You know, it's good, but it's not going to get you positions up. And Redford basically, every time it came into a side-by-side battle for position, Redford was the one that was losing out of the draft more than anyone else inside your top 10.
Yeah, running that higher downforce and trying to be as aggressive as possible. I think maybe it cost Will Redford a podium, but standing on top of the podium, Nikolai Hanim, the Rust Racing driver from Scandinavia, takes home P1, TNT Racing's and Medema in P2. Henry Salim from Finland rounding out the podium. Christophe Herbigno, after contact in the heel of the boot, actually no contact, he got off by himself through the grass, came back on in 9th, recovers to 4th. Will Redford in P5, Connor Harrington in P6, Stefan Remedy P7, Fabio Berchtold P8, Frank Nguyen in P9, and Andrew L. Berry rounding out the top 10. Looking down the order, Servi Seppa from Finland in P11, Andy Schlegel in P12, Gary Bystorm in P13, Thomas Seiger, another TNT driver, in P14. Martin Rullis had to start from the pit lane after both of his laps were disallowed in qualifying, able to get to at least to P15, but he probably wants a better result. Stephanie Krokos from France in P16, Edward Deering from Illinois in P17. Mikko Nurmi had that weird start issue where he came down pit lane with the pace car, finishes P18. Lyubov Ostriokaya, the Russian driver, in P19. Ever Paddock, after going into a heavy impact down the chute, finishes in P20. Kinetic Racing's Unos Polkas in the number 15, P21. Puder Boudon, that first lap crash, he's able to at least get a couple laps in for P22. And then Rust Racing's Micheline Green, that suspension failure from contact in the heel of the boot. Fortunately, delegates him to last place.
Worth noting, by the way, that Mikko Nimri went down pit road a second time, which is the reason why he was 1 minute 27 back at the end. I did note when he came up pit road the first time, he was about 45 seconds back, but there must have been some form of an issue with a setting, or maybe he was running a qualifying trim setup, as you mentioned, for example, where normally these drivers take all the fuel out the car. One thing that has to be praised, though, is just the way that Nikolai Haim was able to get to the front of the field today and then be able to pull out as soon as he got to the front of the field, put his head down, and whilst everyone else started fighting behind him, just got himself into position, turning out quick lap after quick lap, being consistent. Number 4 car taking the victory. Great job by him.
And this is not uncommon to see a Rust Racing driver out front in this series. We've seen Greg Seitz, Micheline Green has even led tons of laps in this series out front on these broadcasts, but I think that was going to be the biggest challenge, how to break away from that draft and get away by himself. And when he was able to get around both Will Redford and Herbigno that were fighting ridiculously hard for that P1 position and that double overtake in the inner loop, it was a really good and aggressive move from the Rust Racing machine.
Yeah, you're completely right. And one thing as well I wanted to add, I talked about it in the race, the fact that it was a very clean start. We only had basically a couple of drivers involved in incidents early on. We had the number 16 car. We've had Pierre Bourdais down at turn number 1, lap number 1. I've seen the track blocked at that section of the racetrack. Early in the season, don't forget, this is one of the first big strength of field races of the season. To have a clean run the way we did, despite the fact they were going 3 wide at the start into that first corner, really is a testament to the fact that these drivers have done a lot of practice. They really thought about their approach into the race, because it is so easy. Even if it's a rolling start, you're on essentially cold tyres when you get to that first braking zone. And turn 1, that 90-degree, slightly off camber braking zone, it is a real test for these drivers, but they pretty much all managed to make it work. So credit to the drivers. And I just hope that as we go through the 12 weeks of this season, especially when we go to ovals and restarts and sections where we've got a very short run, down to turn number 1, like at Spa later on in the year, that drivers remember to have the sportsmanship and also the awareness into that first section of the racetrack.
So you get to check a look. You mentioned some of these short runs down in the corners. Well, it's a bit of a longer run that we're going to next week into the Italian track of Monza. Last time I went to an Italian track, we had a Fittipaldi and then a European karting champion with us. So, of course, this is going to be an exciting one. And then you mentioned some of the ovals and some of the short tracks. But here we go. This is a long speed circuit where we mentioned the draft being powerful today. The draft is going to be huge when we come here.
Oh, yeah. It is a track where in these type of cars you're on full throttle for 80 to 85% of the time. Now, I personally would absolutely just love to see them running this racetrack without chicanes, but I am sadistic at the best of times. I do think that turn 1 will be messy because it always is at Monza. I much prefer, by the way, the old first chicane at Monza, the left right. Of course, we saw Mika Hakkinen crash out in the 1999 Italian Grand Prix, the last time they used that old layout. The sleeping policeman will be critically important, as will be the runoff areas. We'll see drivers going around the virtual styrofoam bollards and all these sorts of things. It's one of those where you're going to have to take all the wing off. It's going to be one of those where track placement will be critical, and I will say already, whoever is leading at the end of lap number 1 either needs to have a big breakaway like we had today, or really needs to think about, I'm going to be overtaken, I'm going to just have to find my way back to the front if I want that W.
Yeah, it's going to be a race all about the draft, positioning, and timing. Just making sure you put your car in the right place, down these slower little chicanes, and down those long straightaways. But for now, this is going to end our coverage here. But if you want to follow us, don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch. If you want to see more of some of these drivers, I know Christoph Herbingo and Delta Sport U4K, as well as Kinetic Racing, some of the teams I mentioned running today, going to be running tomorrow on the Ivor Endurance at Monza. So be sure to watch out for that. But this ends our coverage from Watkins, Glen, of the Indy Pro 2000 Series. My name is Jonathan Burke. Alongside me this week was Will Vincent, Hugo Luis in the production booth, and we say so long, and we'll see you next week in the Italian countryside.